know that I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Genesis chapter 28, verse 15. In the name of the one, triune God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Please be seated. The sermon this morning is entitled Promise of Freedom. I have a dream. My soul groans within me for the freedom and the redemption of all of God's people. And I'm reading from Paul's epistle to the Romans. It says there, we know that the whole creation has been groaning in labor pains until now. And not only the creation, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly while we wait for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. For we hope that we are saved. Now, hope that is seen is not hope. For who hopes for what is seen? But if we hope for what we do not see, we wait for it with patience. So yes, we wait, and we wait, and we wait. And we struggle against evil, and we struggle against the forces of injustice and oppression, knowing that we must coexist with that which is against the will of God. And as the disciples in our gospel reading this morning asked Jesus to explain the meaning of the parable of the sower, Jesus made it very clear that the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. God is the Lord of all creation. And this entire earth, this world, is God's field. The good seed, which the sower plants, are the children of the kingdom. There is no bad seed. God made all things good. And yet as God takes these good seeds, us, the children of God, the sons and daughters of our Heavenly Father, we must be mindful that though God created the world and created us as good, the weeds are there. The weeds represent the forces of evil. And these forces are manipulated and controlled by the devil himself. The harvest, which the Lord said that we should wait for in patience, is the end of the age. And yes, there will be a time when the angels, and the archangels, the cherubim, and the seraphim will all come upon this world. The weeds will be collected and thrown into an eternal fire. But the righteous will shine like sun in the kingdom of their Father. If you have ears, listen. Listen for freedom. How would you describe the sound of freedom? For most Americans, the sound of freedom can be described by the sound that comes from ringing the Liberty Bell, which is located in Philadelphia. The Liberty Bell was commissioned in 1752 and is an iconic symbol of American freedom and the American dream. The bell was cast with the lettering, quote, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." And this particular wording is a reference from Leviticus chapter 25, verse 10, which refers to the Jubilee, or the instructions to the Israelites to return property and to free slaves every 50 years. The Liberty Bell not only reminds us of the promise of freedom, but it also inspires us to work for the freedom of every human being. Embedded in the depths of our U.S. Constitution, the United States Declaration of Independence makes it clear that all humans are created equal, and that we are all endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That's great. Honestly. Wonderful to have this promise of freedom. We live in a land of the free. But let us not forget that it's because of the brave. There are people who lay their lives on the line every single day so that we can worship here freely. Go to our workplaces without fearing being attacked. Talk about equal rights, equal pay, and respect human dignity in every life. Yes, I have a dream. A dream about freedom, and I want to hear the sound of freedom echoing throughout this land. Unfortunately, forced labor, forced marriage, human trafficking, and the child sex trade have all increased significantly in recent years. Now, this is not a story of generations past, but this is our story in our generation. Nearly 50 million people are victims of modern slavery. 50 million people today are slaves. Some scholars would argue that we have more slaves today than in any time in human history. But let us not be quick, as might our tendency be, to point the finger to underdeveloped countries or nations that struggle financially, because the statistics do not point that way. Believe it or not, more than half, 52% of all forced slavery can be found in upper middle income or high income countries. That is why, just recently, a controversial movie was released entitled Sound of Freedom. The movie is based on a true story that shines a light on the dark reality of human trafficking, specifically the child sex trade market. In the movie, Tim Ballard, a government agent, embarks on a mission to rescue children from sex traffickers. He rescues a young boy from a ruthless child trafficker. And he could give himself a pat on the back, and people could tell him, job well done. But not so fast. After rescuing this young boy, Tim Ballard learns that the boy's sister is still captive, and he decides to embark on a dangerous mission to save her. With time running out, he quits his job and journeys deep into the Colombian jungle, putting his life on the line to free her from a fate worse than death. On the whole, the movie drives home the message that the promise of freedom is not enough. The promise of freedom must be accompanied by the pursuit of freedom. These must go hand in hand. You see, God not only promises us freedom, but he also pursues us until we experience freedom in and through our relationship with Jesus Christ. In our reading this morning from the book of Genesis, we find that Jacob, tired from the journey of life, lays down, puts a rock under his head, and falls asleep. And in that moment, he says that as he laid his head down and fell asleep, he dreamed that there was a ladder set up on earth, and the top of it reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And the Lord stood behind him and spoke. You see, the Lord approached Jacob at a pivotal moment in his life. This was not a moment when everything was rosy and everything in the world was good. No. In this particular time and place, Jacob was fleeing from his home after deceiving his father Isaac and taking Esau's blessing. And as Jacob journeys to his uncle Laban's house, Jacob finds himself in a desolate place, vulnerable and alone. But it is in this dark place, this place of loneliness and vulnerability, in this tragic moment of uncertainty, God reveals himself to Jacob in a dream of freedom, promising to be with him always. But you see, God not only made a promise to Jacob, but he also went out of his way to pursue and enslaved Jacob. Pursued him in order to free him from the chains that bound him, from a past that others would look at and then discard him for. In Genesis chapter 28, verse 15, God says to Jacob, "For I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." This passage reminds us that just as God assured Jacob of his constant presence, please know, there is no situation, no circumstance where God's presence cannot be found. Can we say the same is true for the presence of the church today? Is the church our constant companion in times of trouble? Or do we remain on the sidelines, enjoying a Sunday worship, an occasional Bible study, maybe even attend a prayer session? See, the Bible makes it very clear that God is not a distant deity who is indifferent to our life experiences. Yet we must raise the question as a church, are we there for those who suffer today? Does the church walk in the valley with those who are victims of injustice and burdened by the weight of oppression? Are we there? The Bible teaches us that God's promises are sure and certain. We may not always understand God's timing or his ways, but the Bible makes it clear, your plans. My ways are not your ways. But we can rest assured that God is faithful and true to his word. So we must ask ourselves, are we faithful? When those around us are hurt by the trials and tragedies of life, do they feel like they can trust us to be there for them? Or the moment that it becomes uncomfortable or untimely, we let go? Have we as a church looked at others and disqualified them based on their past? Do we keep them from serving freely because of their past sin or their past struggles? God did not do this to Jacob. He knew Jacob's past. And yet he called him to serve freely the greater purposes that God had in store for him. You see, the Holy Scriptures remind us that we have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. None of us are perfect. None of us get it right all the time. I'm not perfect. I have areas in my life where I am broken. And I am not the perfect Episcopal priest, or the perfect pastor, or the perfect friend. But can you accept me anyway? Can you let me serve you freely? You see, God is great because he understands this reality. But do we realize this? See, Jacob was in no way a perfect man. He knew that. He wasn't oblivious to it. He wasn't ignorant of his past. He knew he made mistakes. He faced trials. He wrestled with doubts just like us. But the amazing thing, the miraculous thing, is that even in his imperfections, God chose to bless Jacob and show him favor. And I stand before you, one who has been blessed and shown favor by God, even in the midst of my imperfections. This reminds us that God's love is not based on our merit or our works or our perfect little life. But it is a gift of grace given freely. Given to us all freely. Not because it's free, because there was a price to pay. But because we have received freely that which costs so much, let us then be mindful that just as we have received grace freely, we must give grace freely. No, it's not okay to rest on our laurels just because we've been freed by Jesus Christ and we are called Christians and we are members of a church. No, that is not enough. We must be intentional about defending and protecting the freedom of every human being and pursuing them. Even when they hate us, even when they want to be left alone. Pursuing them until they themselves come to experience freedom in Christ. Until they themselves have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, who makes all things new. Fulfilling the promise of freedom is everyone's responsibility. The life of Jacob is therefore a testimony to the truth that our setbacks, our shortcomings, they don't have to be the end to a tragic story. They don't have to be the final chapter in our life. it can actually be the beginning of a testimony of triumph. And whoa, what a book God was going to write with Jacob's life. When the wonderful promise of freedom and the amazing pursuit of freedom go hand in hand, then the sound of freedom will ring aloud and the world will be changed for the better. I close with an excerpt from Reverend Martin Luther King's speech in 1963 entitled, "I Have a Dream." This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new being. My country, 'tis of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. So let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from the heightening Alleghenies of Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the courageous slopes of California. But not only that. Let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from the Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. When we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every city and every hamlet, from every state, from every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. To God be the glory, now and